In the past, I've had other journalists on the channel, including The Athletic's Jeff Gluck and NBC Sports' Dr. Deandra. We've had some really interesting and entertaining conversations. Just an FYI, I have another journalist you might have heard of scheduled for an appearance next week. This week, however, I'm excited to introduce to you another journalist that I'm also happy to call one of my fellow coworkers at heavy.com, except to be honest, she's a little more diverse than I am because she covers both NASCAR and the NHL. Her name is Kat Pitre. And I'd like to welcome to the channel, Kat Pitre. Hey, Kat, thanks for joining me today.
Thank you for having me. I'm so excited to talk all about the NASCAR drama that's going on.
Yeah, there's plenty of it going on. But before we get to the actual drama, I want to kind of just go back. We're 19 races into the season after Nashville, and just kind of give me your assessment, maybe your top story. I know I was in New Hampshire a couple weeks ago, and I asked the different drivers, Kyle Busch, Kyle Larson, all these guys, their top stories for 2024. So I'm kind of curious to hear what you would say your top stories are for 2024.
To be honest, I think my top story has to be something that's happening off the track, but very much has implications for what 2025 is going to look like. And with so many drivers co-owning teams, it obviously is going to have an effect on what we're seeing on the racetrack this year. And that has to be the new media rights deal that NASCAR has just closed down, and then the upcoming charter agreements, which have been very much contentious between the drivers and the team owners and NASCAR holdings, et cetera. And I do apologize to anyone who's been in my life because I have not stopped talking about the charter agreements since basically, I think it was like Denny Hamlin who kind of came out and was like, these aren't happening. We're so frustrated. And that kind of opened the door for other team owners or co-owners and drivers to be like, we're not loving the deal that NASCAR is offering us, and here's why. And so it's really opened the floodgates for fans and sort of those of us who like to dig into like the business side and the contracts and things like that to really understand behind the scenes what NASCAR looks like off the track. And that's been a huge conversation kind of percolating right now.
Yeah, and it's funny because I know we had talked previously about kind of the topics. And so that was one of our topics. So let's just jump right into that. Let's go into the actual charter negotiations because like you said, Denny Hamlin, which I just love that he has his podcast because it gives him a platform to talk about these kind of topics that are sensitive that we otherwise in the past didn't hear about. So kind of give me, I know I read one of your pieces that you wrote, I think a couple weeks ago about it. Just kind of give me your assessment. Do you feel like that it's heading in the right direction? You mentioned contentious. Do you feel like that it's going to actually, could there possibly be a boycott? I hate saying that word, but it's possible, but it's just kind of an interesting dynamic, as you mentioned, that's kind of going on in the background behind the scenes, but it's something that we're all interested in finding out what's going to happen.
I mean, I think everyone, including the owners and the drivers, would like to avoid a boycott. At this point in time, I really don't know. I mean, it's certainly a possibility in the sense of it could be kind of a last-ditch effort to leverage something against NASCAR holdings. NASCAR is really interesting in the sense that it sort of defies the typical North American sports market visage because it's essentially owned by a private equity firm, which is a single family, the France family.
Right.
And NASCAR teams are sort of stuck under the current charter agreements, which of course expire at the end of the season. They're stuck with really a single revenue stream sponsorship, which is sort of propping them up. And, you know, we see NASCAR on track as this very, I don't know, like you don't think about the money behind it.
Right.
And it could be really shocking to realize these teams, a lot of them can really struggle to break even. And that has been sort of a discussion overall. And we're seeing it with Stewart-Haas Racing and them shuttering their doors. This is kind of a direct result of charter agreements not having the team's best interest when it comes to allocating revenue in order to allow them to break even outside of a sponsorship stream. And they're having to sell off their charters and things like that. So we're seeing like the real effects of it. For teams, I mean, it's in their best interest to be able to get a charter agreement in place before the season expires.
Yeah, absolutely.
And because the season too, their on-track performance relates to a lot of their negotiating leverage. So they kind of need to be able to get something in place. But for the France family, I mean, they hold a lot of power. They own NASCAR Holdings. They own a majority of the tracks. You know, they're well within their ability to say, okay, you don't want to race, that's fine. Like, we'll be fine financially. So I very much hope there isn't a boycott, but I wouldn't take it off the table just in a last ditch effort in terms of leverage.
Right. I agree. I completely agree. Okay. So speaking of Hamlin, let's move on to our next topic. And Nashville, I thought it was really kind of interesting because the tables, as far as I'm concerned, were reversed. And I don't know if you heard, Kyle Larson was on SiriusXM yesterday and he did an interview and talked about respect. And he mentioned it in his post-race interview on Sunday. And so the tables were reversed in a sense that it was Kyle Larson who was running Denny Hamlin and washing him up the track at Nashville. Then the previous week, where I was in New Hampshire, Denny did it to him, and Denny's done it to him at Kansas. It was at Pocono last year. So Denny has a history of, and he's talked about it with this new car, that it on 1.5 mile tracks, when you go into a turn and you come out, it's easy to slide up the track and just push that guy on the outside up the track. And so he's really become quite adept at doing that. And, you know, to his credit, but obviously it rubs drivers the wrong way. Kyle Larson being a friend, which I always find an interesting dynamic in them being friends and competitors. And now they're really rivals. And Denny said this last week on his podcast. Yeah, it's a rivalry. And I think we all have agreed that it's been a rivalry because you can only really have a rivalry if you're competing up front. No one cares about guys running 21st and 22nd. That's not a rivalry, but these guys are contending for wins. So kind of give me your assessment and your thoughts on the rivalry and Kyle Larson kind of doing what he did last week at Sunday and responding and saying, hey, you're going to run me up the track. Well, I'm going to race you. The common saying among race car drivers is, I'm going to race them how they race me. So he's kind of turned the tables and raced him. So kind of give me your thoughts on this quote unquote rivalry between Denny and Kyle Larson.
I mean, there's so many things to jump off of here. The first point that I want to say is that I'm not calling Denny Hamlin, you know, I'm not saying he's lying or embellishing, but I can't imagine within the specs of the car that it is absolutely necessary to take turn 5 out super wide just with it, like it just happens naturally within the car. I mean, there's total driver strategy and drivability within this. Like, that is a classic move on his part.
Right.
Okay, I don't always think that's the car happening.
Right.
But you're totally right. Like, it is absolutely a strategy, and it's something that he's very, very good at using in order to push cars off the track. But of course, within NASCAR, drivers are going to drive with the same amount of respect and accountability as the worst car on the grid. So essentially, like, I do understand where they're coming from, where they're saying like there's a level of trust and respectability. However, they're all kind of racing with that same set of standards, and those standards are a little bit low. And this is maybe one of those moments where we say, in the future, in the 2025 season, is there going to be more driver penalties leveraged by NASCAR in order to prevent this from happening? Obviously, cars are sustaining a lot of damage. That is going to incur higher costs for the team. I could imagine that NASCAR could get involved, perhaps at the behest of some of the team owners, to say, you know, yes, this rivalry is getting us a lot of media coverage. Fans really love this rivalry. It's absolutely helping their personal careers. People are talking about it on social media. That gets more eyes on the sport. That's bringing in more money. However, them constantly fighting on track is incurring a lot of damage, and that's taking dollars out of our pockets because we constantly have to have the car in the garage and fix these tiny little like problems that they're happening because they're essentially having like a spat on the track that really doesn't need to happen. So I could see where maybe NASCAR in the future, if things continue to get worse, I would say, I could see them stepping in and leveraging driver penalties to just kind of set the tone and say, okay, we love that you guys have a rivalry. This rivalry, as you said, has been going on for quite a bit of time.
Right.
But I could see them saying like, we're going to kind of put the kibosh on this. And this is the driver standard that we are going to set and enforce by leveraging penalties against the drivers themselves or the teams. And it's really going to be up to, I think, penalties and actual consequences for stupid actions in order to make the drivers change their behavior. Nothing is going to happen with one driver saying on their podcast, he's not giving me the respect. Like, they don't care.
Right.
That's kind of like my perspective on it. I could see this getting out of control in the future, but they've been doing this for a long time. It's exciting for fans to watch. It seems that they're having fun with it, question mark, as friends. So I don't know. That's where I'm at with it.
Well, I will say, Kyle mentioned yesterday, he said, listen, I want to win multiple championships. Denny wants to win a championship, and it's in our best interest if we're focused on racing and not, battling against each other. And I think Denny said when he was on the team radio, grab ass. So they're playing grab ass out there. But I mean, I know rivalries are such a huge part of NASCAR. And I know NASCAR president Steve Phelps said earlier this year how he wants the drivers to lean into rivalries. But like you said, it can go over the line and they can push it sometimes. I hope they don't intervene, but they could. There could be something later down the line if it does continue to escalate. Let's hope it doesn't. But I mean, I am a huge fan of my channel's called Beating and Banging for a reason, because I love to watch them banging and getting out there and getting roughing each other up, because you don't see that in F1. It's just not possible, because the tires and the car setup just won't allow it. Because if you do that in an F1 race, one of the cars is going to lose a wheel or something's going to happen.
You're in the wall, essentially. Right. I was just about to say, coming from a predominantly F1 mindset, is that you don't see this. And this is something that is so quintessentially NASCAR. Right. And something you can really see in stock car racing, just given the specs of the car, that you can be a little bit rough around the edges. But like you said, when you're ramming under a safety car, the back end of somebody's car in front of you, just for no reason, because you're frustrated. Right. Okay, maybe we need to take a step back and realize there's a line between driving aggressively, in which case I think that's a very good thing, and feeding into a rivalry for like the media's sake. Right. And also just being gratuitous with your aggression in a sense that really doesn't leverage the car forward or is going to get you any points for a team. So like you said, there's absolutely a line, but there's a real precedent for rivalries in NASCAR, and that's one of the reasons why people love it so much.
Yeah, and you mentioned about the safety car. When that caution came out and Denny was running into the back of Larson, that's when his crew chief Chris Gabehart was saying, "Hey, stop it." He was getting very animated, and I don't know if you saw, but Carson Hocevar got penalized for doing something similar in that race. I think it was $50,000 and 25 points. What he did with Harrison Burton. So there is a history and a precedent of, if you wreck someone or spin someone under caution, which actually happened in that race. So Denny, I mean, he's a cagey veteran. He knows the line and where to cross up to the line, get up to the line, or crossing over it. So it'll be interesting to see where this goes in the future. And I'm always up for a good rivalry. So let's move on to our next topic, Kat, and let's talk about a subject that I, as the father of 3 daughters and someone who covers NASCAR for a few years, and I want to see the sport expand, and that's women in sports. And that's why I love having you on my channel, because I want more women in sports. And Hailie Deegan is a topic that's going on right now. And it looks like, I know with AM Racing, I have a relationship with them from several years ago, because I was doing regular videos with Austin Wayne Self, and he was a truck series driver. And so I know from the past of AM Racing, and so she went over there and she started, and she's been in the Xfinity Series car this year. And now it looks like with Joey Logano coming in and racing this coming weekend at Chicago in the number 15 car, she's out. Apparently, according to reports, she took her link to, I think in her bio, it said she raced for AM Racing. I don't recall seeing that, but someone reported that she had that in her bio and she's taken that out. So it looks like this might be the end of the road for Hailie Deegan. I don't know. I hope not. I hope that she can find her way, or we can find some other. I know Jade, I think it's Jade Adavician, is another up and coming female driver. But I just kind of want to get your thoughts on Hailie Deegan, where she is, where she's been. I mean, obviously she hasn't performed up to the standard that they expect in the Xfinity Series. So kind of give me your assessment on where Hailie Deegan is.
Yeah, I have loved watching Hailie Deegan, even though, I mean, the statistics don't lie. She has struggled in this series. There is a part of me that wonders if the public perception, we typically hold female athletes to a much higher standard to their male counterparts, particularly in their rookie season. So there is a part of me that wonders if the negative public perception around her rookie year performance has something to do with that. It's not uncommon for racers to struggle in their rookie season. That being said, she has struggled, and I can understand coming into the Chicago race, which is something that I mean, the team wants to get points, right? They make money partially through succeeding on track. So I can understand that they also very much want to get points in Chicago and to do well in that race. And Joey Logano is absolutely going to help them do that. And I want to say it's about what, 42 cars kind of on the grid in Chicago trying to get through?
Yeah, there's 43 entrants and there's
43.
38 actual entries that will make the field.
Right. So they clearly didn't think with Hailie Deegan that they would be able to actually get an entry on the field. I can understand, again, when they're looking at the hard numbers of it, that they would see that perception. What I don't love is sort of the commentary surrounding her seeming departure from the team, even if it's just temporarily.
Right.
I didn't love Wade Moore's statement on the fact. I didn't love his at least from my perspective, his sort of allusions to Hailie perhaps not being as competitive of a driver, or maybe not having that competitive edge that they seek in drivers. I didn't love that allusion. Again, that's my perception from his
Sure.
quote. I didn't necessarily love Kenny Wallace's comments on the matter on Twitter, or X, I should say.
Right.
So it's been kind of this push-pull of, yes, she's not really performing in this series. She has a history in NASCAR and NASCAR affiliated series, and she's done very well in them. So it's not like they were just pulling a female driver out of thin air and putting her on the grid. She has a history within NASCAR, and she's performed well. So it stands to reason that she could perform very well in the Xfinity series. She absolutely has that capability. And I think perhaps she's not getting the support or the resources allocated, or if she is and she's not really competing, maybe she needs a little bit more time.
Right.
And I think it would be really interesting, and I haven't done this yet, but I plan to in the future, is to look at other rookie seasons within that series, within similar in that same team, to see what support and resources were allocated, to see, how racers have performed, and at what point did they start crawling beyond 12th place, which I think is her highest finish,
Right.
with the team, and just kind of seeing, okay, is this equitable, or are we holding some suspect standards just because Hailie Deegan is a woman?
Right. Yeah, you make some good points, and like I said, I don't know what the final decision. It just
Mm-hmm.
doesn't sound like it's headed in the right direction. If she's taking
Yeah.
AM Racing off her bio, it sounds like there might be something contentious going on there. So I guess we'll just have to wait and see. It's just one of those silly season rumors.
Yeah.
That's what I love about silly season, is there are a lot of rumors. Some of them come to fruition, others don't. So we'll just have to wait and see what happens. All right, so the last topic I have for you, Kat, and we talked about it because Hailie's out this weekend and being replaced this weekend in Chicago by Joey Logano. Let's talk about the Chicago race. I went there last year. It was a great event, albeit interrupted by, I think it was record floods. I remember telling my family, great, we're here, and biblical flooding's going on. And it was just chaos. I don't know if you saw the video on, I think it was just in the garage. They had a weird garage area set up, but there were
Yeah.
guys, it was like, I think like 8, 9, 10 inches of rain where everything was underwater. It was really crazy, and they had drainage issues, but because they had so much rain. So Shane Van Gisbergen goes out, he wins the race, stuns the NASCAR world. Now he's the prohibitive favorite to win again this year. So kind of give me your thoughts on what you're expecting this weekend in Chicago, whether you think SVG can win a second race, who you think might be a contender to compete against him.
I love the Chicago race. I went to college in Chicago, so there's a part of me that like really loves it.
Right.
Um, I think Shane Van Gisbergen can, and I think that's because he has so much confidence. Confidence has a huge sway in drivers, and it really does impact their on-track performance. And I think because, as you said, he is the prohibitive favorite, everybody's looking to him to perform. I think if he can feed off of that energy and go into it thinking, I won this last year, I'm the favorite for it, I'm the reigning champion of this track, I can do it again. I think he absolutely can do it again. I think that possibility is there. I actually just spoke with Alan Day, who's the 4-time Euro NASCAR champion. He is coming in with JSSI and is racing in the Chicago track. He's a street track favorite.
Right.
I don't, and maybe he won't appreciate me saying this, I don't necessarily think he's going to win this, but I think he's going to be a really interesting racer to watch just because he is a 4-time world champion coming from Euro NASCAR. However, the cars are different in that series.
Sure.
They're much faster, they're much heavier in the American series, and on a street track, those sorts of specs are absolutely going to affect drivability. And I'm sure this is very similar for Joey Logano. They're coming in without any practices, essentially,
Right.
into the street track, which is also going to very much affect it. And coming in with a team that they don't really know, a crew chief that they're not used to working with, that's going to be really interesting.
Right.
But Alan Day, and perhaps for Joey Logano or somebody else on the track, if Hailie Deegan is on her way out, they're going to be looking to replace that seat. So it's going to be really interesting to look at the drivers who are like Alan Day, searching for an American seat in a contract, or drivers who are perhaps their contract is expiring at the end of 2024, could be looking for a switch. It's going to be interesting to keep your eye on them. They may not be at the front of the pack, but it's their drive in Chicago that's going to impact their ability to negotiate a contract in the future, perhaps with Hailie Deegan's open seat or something else in the future. So that's kind of like what I'm going to be focusing on watching the Chicago race, but I absolutely do think Shane could win it again.
Yeah, and I was also thinking, because you're talking about Alan Day and the Xfinity series, and I know Shane has won. I think it was Sonoma, and I can't Portland. It was Portland, and then he back to back at Sonoma. He won those Xfinity road course races. So I mean, in the Xfinity series race, I think he's definitely the favorite. And then in the Cup Series, obviously he won it last year, so he should probably do as well or do well this year. So. Hey, Kat, I really appreciate you joining me this first time. So I hope we can have you back on the channel in the future. It was great discussion on a variety of topics. I appreciate your time, and I look forward to talking to you more in the future.
Thanks so much, Kyle. I appreciate it.